you mentioned research that would support real or would envisage real support for real sustainability. And one thing you didn't mention about the various kinds of research for it is research into a non-capitalist economy, because it is my belief that capitalism cannot reduce and reuse. It is impossible for it to do so, and it must be significantly restrained down to, off the top of my head, at most 25% of the GDP. Otherwise, we cannot achieve proper emission reduction. And the only way to do it will be by what people would say is a command economy. I would say maybe an engineered economy. It would have to include rationing and things, similar things. There is, to my mind, no way around it. And as far as I know, no one in economics, and I'm not an economist, I have to admit, but no one in the economics department is doing research towards that.
And engineering, and so the things that I can speak of in some confidence are matters to do with those subjects, and there I think there is a lot that can be done, for example with regard to building or architectural design,
yes,
that will help reach net zero. So I'm very keen for the university to support those kind of initiatives. Tony referred to it as a kind of reverse Manhattan project. I actually like that title. The Manhattan Project was an enormous effort by physicists and by engineers. Of course, it ended with the creation of an incredibly destructive weapon, and that, I guess, is why Tony refers to it as reverse,
yes,
because we are now trying to do something for the good of mankind rather than create something which, though it seemed necessary at the time, has had enormously destructive consequences. But the idea of gathering together scientists and engineering professors and students to make a vigorous attack on this problem, I like.
Yeah. Well, I call it an effort to create mega life rather than mega death. But I listen to what you say, Arthur, and I think what's happening now is that the views of climate scientists, honest climate scientists, are tending very, very strongly in your direction. So Julian Allwood here at the university, who is Professor of Environmental Engineering, or Environment and Engineering, says that his in the research project called UK Fires, their conclusion is that total energy use has to be cut back to 60% of where it is now. Well, you cannot do that with neoliberal hyper-capitalism. You can only do that with a highly decisive way of distributing distributing resources within society. Kevin Anderson on Monday, who came to university on Monday because I organised an event called The Responsibility of Universities at a Time of Environmental Collapse, he makes it absolutely clear that if you're going to cut back resource use, then you have to cut it back from where the resources are. So it's the rich countries that have to contribute the most, and it's the rich within both rich and poor countries who have to contribute the most. This is the opposite of a capitalist economy. And capitalism is an extractivist system. It's very good, actually, at extracting money from the poor. But it's an extractivist system, both in terms of taking resources from those who need it, but also from depleting the resources of the earth. The university, it's like the mathematics department the engineering department, like I already gave the example of the UK Fires project, you've just got to set the mathematics onto these issues and you'll come up with the answer. This system cannot deliver what we need. I'll just say one thing about net zero. I use the word zero, or as UK Fires do, they use absolute zero. Of course, you can't get to absolute zero, but net zero is an excuse for what's being called overshoot. Andreas Malm has written a book recently called Overshoot, that everybody's accepted. You could overshoot your emissions reduction targets because with the hope that you can cut back later. Well, that's a recipe for business as usual, for not doing what you need to do. So I tend to not talk about net zero because I think already within net zero is a sleight of hand, and it's a sleight of hand, and it's a sleight of thought, and a university should not be using that term.
Try to bring together your different views. If I understood correctly, Professor Evans is more concerned with what is happening inside the university, and Mr. Booth particularly concerned with how the university interacts with the external. I would, from my experience of 8 years of the University of Cambridge, I would argue that a lot of the problems that happen with the exterior actually stem with how the university responds to concerns of staff and students. But I would like to particularly focus on one thing that Mr. Booth mentioned, was about how you would feel as a chancellor if someone from staff who is not able to vote. How would you feel with that idea of knowing there are people in the university that cannot even vote? And my question to you is, are you aware that it's virtually impossible to even reach the Chancellor? So if you go to the website, there is no contact of David Sainsbury. So one thing, if you are very persistent, one thing you can do is actually contact the Sainsbury Family Charitable Foundation, and you talk to a lot of people who promise that they will put you in contact with him. But if you ask very uncomfortable questions, he will never answer. And this actually brings the point to you that you mentioned, how the university frames the contribution of David Sainsbury to, connecting people, which is very interesting when the person does not even show himself available. So my question to you both is, would you put at least your contact in the website, or at least your assistant's contact in the website, in case a member of staff or student would like to share their concerns with you, and returning to Professor Evans on the different powers of this university and how can actually do something? You mentioned the Vice Chancellor, you mentioned the Registrar, not sure if you mentioned the Academic Secretary, HR, etc. So imagine that you are approached by a member of staff with evidence of really wrongdoings, case of harassment, plagiarism, etc., and you talk to all these people and they simply ignore. So how can a chancellor change something in a world like this?
So there's a nice initiative by the former Vice-Chancellor of the University of Nottingham, whose name is Sheila West, and every month she made available for one day bookable sessions for any member of the university to talk to her. And I thought that was a wonderful initiative because it enabled people who otherwise are voiceless to talk directly to the Vice-Chancellor and at least express their concerns about what had been happening, be it a matter of bullying and harassment, or be it a matter of overwork or departmental policy or whatever. So I really think that should happen much more widely in the university. That is, the people you've mentioned, the registrar, the academic secretary, the HR director, they should make themselves available once or twice a month so that anyone who has concerns can book a session with them and talk to them. And certainly, if I was Chancellor, and I'm sure Tony is the same, we would want to be available to talk to anyone in the university who wishes to raise matters to us. So that would again mean, making ourselves available so that people can book sessions with us and talk to us about things that are concerning them.
Yeah, well, I've lived in Cambridge for 50 years. People know who I am, and there would be no way in which I could keep myself separate from being contacted by people in this city. I'm a founder member of a group called Friends of the CAM, which we could come on to, which is both inside and out. The CAM, it runs inside and outside of the university. And it ties up with this fact that, look, people, many of the people inside the university, I couldn't say it's probably most, live in the city. They're part of the same city as myself. We're citizens of Cambridge. The university is part of the city. So the idea that I would be unobtainable by people in the university is just couldn't really happen. I think there would probably, as Wynne was saying, need to be some kind of formal arrangement. But there are some official functions of the Chancellor. I mean, we want to change it, but there are some present official functions, which is to hold the senior management of the university to account, to be there to advise. So I would expect a very clear line to be available where if people had a grievance, it was answered and could be addressed within the university, and if that were not appropriate for some independent group to be established outside of the university to address issues of grievance. I mean, really, it grinds a place to a halt. I mean, bullying grinds a place to a halt. You know, I've worked in universities myself, in good departments and less good departments. A department where there is harassment and bullying, the department doesn't function. People are going home at night and all they're thinking about is their head of department. They can't think about their research or their teaching. This is commonplace in universities. There are ways of addressing this. At least we both know about it. And I dispute the fact that I am concerned because I live in the city, lived here for 50 years, and I'm concerned about the relationship between the city and the university, but I'm really deeply concerned about the nature of higher education and have long-standing knowledge of higher education and would like to, like every, the aim would like to be a chancellor for a place where every member of staff feels good about themselves and the place where they work, where every student feels good about themselves and the place where they've come to study.
So I think that's absolutely crucial. We all want for Cambridge University to be an environment in which everyone can flourish, students and staff and administrators. We all want them to be free of any kind of bullying or harassment. And these kind of issues regarding the culture of an institution, they really are set by the people at the top. And I think if the Chancellor sets an example that there must not be any bullying or harassment, and if it is uncovered, it will be dealt with, then that will make a big difference to Cambridge University. As most of us know, there is a lot of bullying and harassment in Cambridge, and it is largely covered up. And unfortunately, that is set by the people at the top. That must change. It would change if I was Chancellor, and I have confidence it would change if Tony were Chancellor as well.
Because quite a lot of what is needed is taking the lid off, allowing things to emerge, allowing things to be expressed. Don't be frightened because people have got criticisms of what's happening in the university, but treat that as an opportunity for change and development and real growth. Are there other questions?
One of the things that I've spent the past decade watching are the various meetings of councils and governance groups such as the Greater Cambridge Partnership and the combined authority that the University of Cambridge has a seat on. But what's never been clear is how does the representative of the university on those committees decide what the university's policy is, for example, on things like busways, on cycleways, on the future growth of Cambridge. And as potential chancellors, is there room to bring about something that the trade union movement has, such as mandating meetings where the pro-vice chancellors have to make the case to, whether it's a committee, whether it's an open assembly of university members, to say, this is what the policy is?
I mean, effectively, Deborah Prentice has committed the university to doubling the size of Cambridge by saying that she is in full support of the government's growth strategy, which is to do that. I don't suppose this has been reflected in a meeting of all staff, but it's just assumed that, and it has increasingly been assumed within university, that the university consists of the senior team, plus, in this case, the Chancellor, rather than the university is all the members, all the staff and all the students of the university. That's what the university is. So this idea of wider consultation, I think, isn't in people's minds. And I think this is, I dislike it, but I find it really sad, because I think it's so anti-academic, it's anti what a university should be, because it's based on a model which is doomed to failure. I have a vision of what this city will look like if we go ahead, if we press ahead with the extent of growth in this city, with the university supports, really actively has supported through the Greater Cambridge Partnership and elsewhere, and on the board for the growth company with Peter Freeman, on the advisory group to Peter Freeman, who's head of the growth company of Cambridge. If this all goes ahead, half of it is never going to be realised. So we're going to end up with this half-built reservoir on the Fens, which universities supported as well, which building a reservoir in the lowest lying area of the country, in the driest area of the country, on the land which is the most important agricultural land in the country, and is prone to sea level rises, which will salinate the underground water within the next 20 or 30 years. And its own university professors, Rob Larter from the Antarctic Survey, when I asked him whether this made any sense to him, he said, it's completely crazy. So I have a vision of these like 6-story blocks of laboratories in northeast Cambridge, kind of in 20, 30 years, being some of them unfinished, half-built, not used, because the whole model is flawed.
So the government policy for a Cambridge-Oxford corridor seems to me to be misguided, and I want to pick up on something that Tony didn't mention, and that is this is one of the richest parts of the United Kingdom, and it seems poor for the integrity of the United Kingdom for still more money to be poured into the Golden Triangle of Oxford, Cambridge and London. I want to see resources diversified across the country, and I particularly feel this because I'm from Wales, and Wales is a very poor part of the country. I don't understand why we've got a Golden Triangle. Why haven't we got a Golden Nonagon? Why are we not distributing research funds and so on amongst a number of universities in the country, including universities in Scotland and universities in Wales. I think the entire policy is deeply misguided, and it is likely to end up fracturing still more the fragile bonds that hold the countries of the United Kingdom together.
And, I mean, given how much pressure universities are under, that universities across the country are in danger of going bust.
Well, Dundee has gone bust, but you are
Yes, and
right.
somehow-
There are real problems in many universities.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's so. You'd like to see a university that you can admire being concerned about the well-being of other colleagues, other academic colleagues, other students across the country who also are entitled to the best education that the UK can offer. And that can happen all over the country.
So this is an important point. The Cambridge Chancellor has a national profile, and they can stand up for higher education nationally. And as Tony has correctly remarked, Cambridge is lucky. It's running a deficit, but it can cope with the deficit. There are universities where there are now very severe cutbacks. And what has happened in Dundee is really quite remarkable. I don't know if people followed the proceedings at Holyrood, but the corruption of senior management at a premier UK university was exposed to the world. The Vice-Chancellor was signing his own expenses off. He seemed to be unaware of major loans that the university had taken out. And so he was given the option of saying whether he was corrupt and incompetent, and he famously said, "I'm incompetent, not corrupt." But that actually could be what's going to be repeated across university after university in this country over the next 2 years, because there are horrendous problems in funding some of our universities, and particularly the universities in Scotland, in Wales, and the north of England. So why the government thinks it's a good idea to pour money into a corridor between Oxford and Cambridge, I cannot fathom. It seems completely contrary to what we need.
Well, I agree with you. And you mentioned that it's like one of the richest places in the country. Of course, Cambridge, the city of Cambridge is the most unequal city in the country. So, and that level of inequality, if that doesn't add up to discrimination, I don't know what is. So the university, by its core value of being opposed to discrimination, should be opposed to this level of inequality, which is you can find all around you. And we should be committed. The university should be committed to ending homelessness in Cambridge, for example.
Within your manifesto, as well as talking about bullying, you also talk about precarity, you talk about casualisation. And I was wondering what your approach to tackling that would be. And I suppose also, is there a kind of broader question about the way that universities have developed, under the sort of pressures of the market, and how we respond to those pressures, which you would want to tackle?
So that's a very good question. So I published an article in the Times Higher Educational Supplement the other day, and I stated correctly that 2/3 of the staff working at the university are working on casual contracts, fixed-term contracts, or whatever. And that was immediately disputed by the university to the Times Higher Educational Supplement, and they said that that figure was incorrect, that in fact the number of people working on casual contracts was only 1/3. So I don't believe their figures. If you go to some of the science departments, large numbers of people are working on fixed-term contracts or on open-ended contracts subject to funding, which are called casual. And there's also something called the Temporary Employment Service, where the university uses people who are not even employees of the university on temporary contracts. So some of this has to change. I would use resources of the university to create more academic positions. I think this is vitally important The university does not have a good record in the creation of academic positions. It has one of the worst records in the Russell Group. And it seems to me vital for young researchers, for young scholars, to be able to apply for positions that are permanent. That is where I would use the resources of the university. And for me, that goes back to the mission statement of the university. Our mission is teaching and research. And if we support teaching and research, we will prosper. And we can even borrow money to create teaching and research positions. And that will allow the university to prosper because it will enhance the reputation of the university as a centre for teaching and research. Otherwise, it seems to me that the fate of young researchers today is very bleak. I expect the university sector as a whole to contract by possibly even 10% in the United Kingdom. And so that's a loss of many academic jobs. I'm sure many young researchers now, having done their PhD or having done a postdoc, think, what's the point of continuing? There seems to be so little opportunity for a position anywhere in the UK. And so this really is wiping out a generation of scholars. We have money. That is where we should be spending money. Instead, the university spends a lot of money, well, we've mentioned one already, on corporate lawyers, but also on external consultancies. That needs to be stopped. There is plenty of expertise among the staff in the University of Cambridge, and we should be using that expertise if we need advice. We should not be going outside the university unless absolutely necessary.
Yeah, I mean, basically I agree, and I think the number of people on short-term contracts can be cut down. I mean, it's such an incredibly inefficient way of doing education. I mean, low pay is an incredibly inefficient way of getting people to getting the best out of people in a job, because they have to find other ways to earn money all the time. But having people on short-term contracts where they're spending most of the time looking to see how they're going to get funded, the next period of employment is going to get funded, means that they can't give of their best. But this whole the university has influence in this country, and the whole funding model of research has become something somewhat similar. So whole departments are busy the whole year. They're spending a third of their time, or maybe half their time, seeking for new funds. I mean, this has changed radically over the time I was an academic, where substantial funds were available for research simply through the core funds of the university, and that shifted to external. Everything had to be externally funding, and this was a remarkably inefficient way of producing research and scholarship.
It's also true, of course, that precarity particularly affects people who have very little financial resources, for example. It obviously affects male family planning choices, but it's particularly detrimental to women who may want to start a family, and also people who have visa requirements for salaries to stay in the country are affected. So precarity has a way of discriminating against certain classes of people that is very unfortunate, in addition to all the other problems that have been mentioned. So the university should be putting money into more permanent jobs.
Absolutely. So can I ask you
I just wanted to ask a clarification question of when you talked about academic positions, you meant what in the terms of the statutes of the university are established posts. Is that correct?
So, I normally don't use the words established and unestablished because you have to spend a lot of time explaining what they are. But I agree exactly with you. I have plots of the number of established and unestablished posts on my website over the last few decades, and it won't surprise you what has happened. The number of unestablished posts has rocketed. The number of established posts is at best flat, generally falling. That needs to be reversed. We need more established posts.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Can I ask you a question about how you as Chancellor, or how you now respond to the Gaza peace camps that have been outside King's and
So there are
outside Trinity, on Magdalen Lawn?
So I live in northwest Cambridge, and my faculty is in northwest Cambridge. So I only occasionally come into the city, maybe once every couple of weeks. Every time I passed the peace camps, they seemed very friendly places. I saw no evidence of anything that concerned me. So I do not approve of what has happened. There are two reasons. First, students have a right to freedom of speech and freedom of protest, providing that's peacefully done. And second, we've already alluded to this, universities should be husbanding their money and spending it on research and teaching and not paying money to corporate lawyers. And of course, to get these injunctions, significant sums of money had to be paid to a company called Shakespeare Martineau. Shakespeare Martineau has a large fraction of the university legal market. So the woes of the university have affected the staff and the students, but Shakespeare Martineau has done very well.
Yeah, well, yes. I mean, I think the university could have handled it completely differently. I think they were relying on the students being novices when it came to negotiation, probably. That actually the students do have a right to peaceful protest. They are living out the values of the university in terms of free expression. Many of the students who were in the peace camps say this was the most important educational experience of their time in Cambridge. Which, we know the experiences from which you learn when you're kind of geared up to learn about what's going on in the world, when you're geared up to learning about what other people have got to offer. They set up what is effectively a study centre within the camp, and I think the university should be proud of them. And then proud of themselves for having thought about the issues that the students raised and find a peaceful way, a satisfactory way of answering their concerns. There is no question that universities should be giving, investing, associating with arms companies at a time of genocide. Just as there's no question at a time of environmental collapse that the university should be associating in any way with fossil fuel companies. I think people have just lost the art of good dialogue, of good questioning. They think everything is to be resolved through the exercise of power. And universities are about the opposite. They're about resolving issues through the exercise of good argument.
So on the divestment of shares and so on in arms companies, I entirely agree, of course, with Tony. When I was a student, we protested, and I helped occupy a rather undistinguished building on the Sedgwick site called the Lady Mitchell Hall. I see no problem with students carrying out peaceful protests. And when we look back at the history of the last 30 or 40 years, we've seen that students and student protests were at the forefront of Vietnam protests, protests against the poll tax, and protests against the Iraq War. And so students can be proud of what they achieved in those instances. I therefore don't agree with what Cambridge University and what some of the colleges have done, and Shakespeare Martineau are now even offering this package to further universities. For them, it's an opportunity to make quite a lot of money, but many of us are concerned about what this means for freedom of expression, academic freedom, and freedom to protest peacefully.
Yep.
I don't know how long the Chancellorship is. I don't know how many years or what.
10 years.
But I've undertaken I have undertaken only to serve 5 years.
My question is, if you were at the end of that period, what would you look back on as being the most proud achievement for the whole world to copy?
So I made much of an issue about the creation of an ombudsman. I think that's very important. The ombudsman must be independent of the other senior university officers, and therefore matters to do with things we've been discussing, academic freedom, bullying and harassment, mismanagement or corruption, they should be considered by the ombudsman. And I think that would actually save the university money, because at the moment what's happening is these disputes tend to rumble on and end up in the courts, and therefore enrich Shakespeare Martino, but to no one else's benefit. So I think one single simple thing that the Chancellor could do that is within his compass or her compass is the creation of the Office of the Ombudsman, make sure it is properly resourced and crucially independent of all the other university officers, so that anyone can take a matter to the Ombudsman if they are concerned.
On this idea, Professor Evans, so proctors in theory should have some power to, as you probably know, ask questions to senior management about wrongdoings in the university. So isn't that enough?
So
About what?
Proctors.
the
Don't they
proctors,
could ask questions about
wrongdoings. Imagine that proctors are approached by a member of staff or students about wrongdoings.
wrongdoings. Sorry.
Exactly.
so I'm ambivalent about the role of the proctors. There is also a university officer called the commissary to whom you can also apply in matters of wrongdoing.
In theory, at least.
These may have worked well in the past. I do not think they're working well in the university today. So I want to see a much more vigorous and well-resourced and independent office, the Office of the Ombudsman. So the proctors, as you probably know, are just humdrum academics who have already their research and their teaching to do. You are correct that you can go to them with a concern, but they don't have the resources or indeed the power to hold powerful people to account. And that's why I think we need something like the Ombudsman. In fact, I think probably this is needed throughout the UK higher education sector. We've seen considerable malpractice at Dundee University, and it won't be surprising if there are further examples of malpractice uncovered as more universities come under scrutiny because of financial concerns. So I would like to see actually an independent set of ombudsmen available for all the universities in the country. But that might be too much for a Chancellor to do. I think this simple thing of getting Cambridge sorted would be good. Very often I think we should sort things in Cambridge and then tell the rest of the world from a position of strength. Tony?
Yeah, I think that's good. I was thinking, well, I thought that, of course, nominally it's 10 years. I thought that if I'm asked that by somebody like you, who's a really good friend, I know that you're asking me in a positive way. Some people might ask me in a more negative way because they think, well, is this man going to live that long? And my answer to that would be, well, I'd like to check your medical records because we never know what time, when we're going to go. But let's say 5 years. My idea is I would like to look back and think the university took the opportunity of there being a change in culture. And the biggest change of culture would be that they could see, people came to understand they had to give up the growth delusion. And the growth delusion, it's through the growth delusion that people find it hard to give up their investments in fossil fuels or their investments in the arms industry. But that is now to be a delusional institution is not a good look. for a university. And if I couldn't bring, that would be my aim as Chancellor, to expose the delusions about growth and their connection to all the other wrongdoings of the university.
So perhaps I can conclude that I think we're in with a chance. I don't think we're favourites, but there's certainly a path through for a reformer candidate. I think our chances are maybe 15 or 20%, and let's hope we can take them.
The university, we both think, would be a better place for one of us being
I agree.
Chancellor.